I think makers have to be optimistic. You know, you have to be incredibly optimistic to just imagine something and then be committed to making that a physical reality. You know, we started this whole project of Making In about placing a value on making. Part of it was to bring people from around the world that you know, what are they making in India now and why, what are they making in Japan now and why, and bringing people that are celebrated, but then also bringing people that are doing things that are less recognized, less celebrated, but you know, I want to place a value, like increase the emphasis and value we place on making.
歌舞伎も400年前京都の四条河原で出雲のお国という人がやっぱりこれも外の野外ですよね。で、始めたもの、それがだんだんこう劇場というなんていうんですかね、自分の城を構えてそこで収入をちゃんとした数でお客様からチケットのものを管理するということになったんでしょうけど、だからもう小学校1年生ぐらいから学校も、早退して途中で抜け出してって、もちろん許可をいただいてね、それで芝居に出てました。だからその時でも頭の中は何をやるにも歌舞伎のことしか考えてなかった。写真を最初見せられた時は舞台ができてなくて石のねしかなかった。ここでどうやってこの石の上で踊るのはどうやって踊ったらいいのかなと思って本当に半信半疑でしたけど、最初に1日目、舞台を見た時に感動いたしましたよね。もう余計な舞台装置はいらないってことですよ。もうこの全てアイルランドのこの景色が演出コーナーまさに、素晴らしい舞台装置として、僕たち歌舞伎を待ち望んでいてくれたんではないかなと。僕がアイルランドに歌舞伎の命をっていうのなんて口はばったくてとてもそんなの逆でね、アイルランドっていうこのジョセフさんのこの土地が今回の歌舞伎のパフォーマンスの演出をすごくしてくれたんではないかなと思いました。
The selection of speakers and things happened very naturally, and we were discussing the potential speakers for Making In from Japan and the different disciplines, and we invited Shugoro Ban. I knew his work. I'd never heard him speak, I love the fact that he had the capacity to challenge his own profession. And I think he's one of these people that's, he just wants to apply creative solutions to problems. That seems to be his outlook in the world, and is frustrated that there's any boundaries on creative solutions to problems.
After I spent 10 years practicing, I was disappointed about my own profession as architects, because mainly we are working for privileged people who has money and power. Because power and money is invisible, they hire us to make a monument to show off their power to the public. And I was tired of working for privileged people. I'm not saying I'm not interested in making monument, but I want to use my knowledge and experiences not only for privilege, but also general public, and even people who lost their houses by natural disasters. I start developing the structure out of humble material like recycled paper tube. And this structural system is very appropriate for, particularly for the inexpensive, affordable housing shelters. Before we built temporary shelter, people evacuated in a big roof like a gymnasium, and government didn't care about privacy of families. I thought the privacy is the most basic human right. I started providing a partition system to give them privacies. I can say that the designing refugee shelter and expensive condominium, same for me. As far as my interest, my enthusiasm, and also satisfaction I get after completed, same. Only difference is whether I'm paid or not. Otherwise, my interest is really the same.
So we're sitting here in the Hedge Theatre, which is tired of 3 rambling house pavilions that we've made here at Fartha. The Passage House and the Stone Vessel both have a strong profile against the sky. So the idea here is to make the opposite of that. So the 3 work together as one.
Part of the kind of seeds for the idea of it being a theatre like this came from, as we were working through and almost finishing the Stone Vessel, we were often over at the quarry, particularly when the Japanese masons came to find a different kind of stone, and we found ourselves looking into the hole in the ground where the stone had been excavated and feeling it looked a bit like a theatre. And somehow the idea that the subtraction of the stone out of the ground would lead to a place or a thing, sort of that seed was sown, and that was kind of in our minds, that the third one maybe would not be something that has a roof or a form sticking up above the ground.
We were looking at cross-sections through sawn down trees and looking at the tree growth rings in the tree. So the flexing that these tiers are doing is a response to that idea of tree rings and how their geometry is impacted by the forces that operate from without.
But it is a place of gathering. I mean, the idea is a place people would gather and collect. And we've spent a lot of our lives wandering around ancient Greek and Roman amphitheatres and always really enjoyed that sense of containment. But maybe the absolute formality of the concentric circles just didn't seem quite right now here and in this Irish landscape. And it's a sort of smaller scale thing we're doing. And in a way, maybe we wanted to feel the force of the movement from the Passage House and the Stone Vessel and the sense that it's kind of responding to them, and that maybe that it isn't a time to make something that has quite that level of formal perfection, you might say. It's something about making a thing that feels more like it's eventually not quite dying back into, but as part of the landscape.
And the principle of the whole thing here is that these are brand new structures, but they're brand new ancient structures.
でもその中でも面白い楽器というのは大太鼓ですよね。風が強い時に木々が揺れるカサカサカサカサとかいう音だとか、雨がザーザー降ってくるっていうのは日本でよく表現する言葉だったり、雪がしんしん降ってくるっていう、こういう日本の場合だと言いますけど、そういうものを全部大きな太鼓から奏でるわけですね。例えばレイン、雨がこう降ってくる音なんてのは太鼓の2つの細いバチでドロドロンドロドロンドロドロンドンドンドンドンドンドンドンドンドンドンドロドロンドロドロンドロドロンドンドンドンドン、これは雨がちょっと降ってるようだけど、もっと激しくね、雷が鳴ったらドンゴロゴロゴロバラバランダラダランダラランダンダンダンダンダンダンダンダラダラってこう激しく雨が降ってきたのを表したりだとか、また雪なんていうのは絶対に音しないですよね。しんしん降るっていうけど、雪が降ってる音なんて誰も聞いたことないのに、これは今度はバチの太い頭の大きいねスティックバチでドーンドーンドーンドン、いかにも雪がこうしんしんと夜雪が積もってくるというような、例えば歌舞伎の中では雪が降り積もる中を裸足でその好きな彼女に会いに行く、ドーンドーンドン、何とも言えずに色気があって悲しげなシーンであると。普通だとこう大きなもんやるともちろん重圧というのがあるんだけど、なんていうのかな、そういう重圧のある大きい役になったり、例えば勧進帳の弁慶なんていうのはもう立ち役の最高位の役ですよ。それを弁慶になった初めてやらせてもらって、そのコスチュームをつけて鏡を見たり舞台に立った時には自分がスーパーマンのようになったような気持ちですよね。だから役者さんの中でもすごく神経を高ぶらせるためにお化粧してる間は扉をクローズして楽屋をクローズして誰も入れないで集中を高めていく方もいらっしゃいますよね。
I'm from Caltra in East Galway originally, and I got into basket making because Dolores and myself wanted to live in the countryside. We kind of fancied a life where gardening and planting things would be part of it. I don't think I originally meant to be a full-time basket maker, but the more of it I did, the more engaged with it I became. The big attraction of basket making for me was the fact that you could grow the willow. It turned a rural location into an advantage, if that makes sense, the fact that you could grow the material. So it wasn't so much that I wanted to become a basket maker as I wanted to be able to grow food, plants, willows, and make something from them. So there wasn't any thought of self-expression or anything like that in the beginning. It was much more about just making the best baskets that I could. But then I think the more baskets I made, the more I got drawn into the challenge of basket making and the satisfaction that comes from improvement. It's a huge thing to feel that you're improving at something. It suited me to have found myself in a discipline, basket making, which can't be mechanized. So, in a way, that's every basket that you see, and I think this amazes people, because some of them are so cheap to buy, but they are all handmade. From about the year 2000 onwards, I started experimenting with materials. Some of it, too, was that I was exposed to work by other basket makers, and then I started being drawn to certain stones that I'd meet, especially ones on the mountain, you know, that had lichen grown on them or something like that. And I think, well, that's a lovely stone, and is there some way that I could incorporate it? But the problem then was that it was a challenge for me because I could see that there was no way I could make something useful with that stone in it. So I kind of accidentally, if you like, slipped into making artistic things that were still part of my tradition of basket making. I think the main reason I work is because I enjoy it. So on one level, it's for myself, but you're also hoping, I think, it'll touch the spirit of others in some way. But then when I'm working well in my workshop, I'd feel that I disappear. Do you know what I mean? I'm not conscious of who's working. I just kind of lose myself in the work itself. There's a kind of a self-forgetfulness, I think, if you're working properly. Kind of, you have to decide what is important in life. What are the important things? What it is that makes you happy? And I often think that happiness is more a byproduct rather than something, you know, the pursuit of happiness, as quoted in the American Constitution, has always struck me as a little bit odd, in the sense that I think happiness is more a fruit from a tree that you cultivate in other ways. For me, it's been amazing to be able to make a living working as a craftsperson. I became a basket maker with the hope that that was possible, but not with the certainty.
The workshop was very much my first love. And then I came to realize that actually you can have things which are beautifully made, but not very exciting. And so it's when the concept drives the making that it becomes interesting. When you sit in a chair that's special, you get feedback from it. It's actually engaging you in a positive way. And we get very used to furniture which is predictable and we've done it all before. It doesn't engage us. But a chair which is right and is going to achieving its potential is much more than physical. It actually gives us a degree of psychological comfort and sense of well-being. You know, as humans, we are so multifaceted if our potential is developed. But I mean, that sense of starting with nothing and finishing up with something which it really communicates is what it's really about.
I think I'm often playing with scale within an enclosed space, and if I go back 10 years when we made the first Magnus piece or work that was titled Magnus, which related to scale, just that kind of monumentality of a scale that you're within the work. Magnus Rinn is the first time of bringing that outdoors, out into landscape. How do you retain that the integrity of that lightness of touch on something that's fundamentally monumental? We're probably 5 to 7 years through a research project of how these forms and materials would perform in an exterior environment, because most of the more monumental works within the Magnus series have a kind of gravity-defying sort of element of touching the ground very lightly, and that you're standing within something that's just poised in movement, so it's this very light touch and gentleness. And then you translate that to the outdoors, where of course you've the elements of wind and weather and a more extreme environment, of course, in Japan, and that's why the Japanese one is particularly interesting. And we've ended up with this kind of bronze wood hybrid. So it's been a very interesting research project of how to maintain that delicacy and lightness of form and movement while having the structural integrity for the external elements.
私が生まれた大津市坂本は、古くから神社やお寺、それで、数多くの僧侶や神社関係の人々が、そしてそこに暮らす町の中で、職人たちがたくさん住んでいる町です。私の祖父、おじいさんが今から100年ほど前に造園業を創業いたしまして、100年を超えることができまして、現在も造園の仕事をと石積みの仕事を携わっておりますけど、でその唐崎神社の一本の松は神主の手で植えられたというふうに記録されておりまして、今からおよそ1400年前に初代の松が植えられたというふうに伝わっています。ご神木になったということは、その木を絶やすことがないように守っていくっていうことも大切な取り組みでありまして、今から1400年前から代々誰かがその地で松を守り育ててきたということが今日まで続いてきたと思います。
御霊の冬をかがふらしめたまい、の守り日の守りに守り恵み先はえたまえと、かしこみかしこみも申す。
どうにください。
神社の方からある日、知人を通じて唐崎の松を管理してくれないかっていう話をいただいた時に、非常に命がけでその松を支えなければならないんだなっていうことを考えておりましたが、一晩時間をくださいと私はその神主の方にお伝えしました。するとその神主の方が何て言うんでしょう、辻井さん、生き物には必ず終わりはあるんですよと。もし辻井さんにお世話になっている間に万が一のことがあったとしても、それはもともとそうだったということなので、それほど重荷に 思わずにできたら辻井さんに世話をしていただきたいんです。そして、私が神社の方にまずこの松の管理をお受けするのであれば、まずこの木の子孫を作ることから始めさせてくださいというふうに申し上げました。1年でも2年でも長く支えていきたいということと、まずこの木が万が一の時に備えて苗を育てていくということを同時に取り組みました。より多くのところでこの唐崎の松のことを知っていただき、大切さをみんなと共有していくことも、この唐崎の松を守っていくことがすごく大切だと私は思っておりまして、実は今回私はこのアイルランドの地に唐崎の松を持ってくるということを以前から考えておりまして、アイルランドに松の種を持ってくることができました。そしてこのアイルランドの地でこの日本の宝である唐崎の松を末永く育てていってもらい、世界中の方々から愛される唐崎の松になってほしいなというふうに願ってもいます。
素晴らしい。OK。
この終わりのない物語ですね。1400年前に始まったこの唐崎の松の物語は永遠に絶えることがなく、何代につながっていくかわからないんですが、永遠につながっていく、この循環っていうんでしょうか、いうことを願っています。
We're very lucky. We have a family history traced in the trade back to 1331. That was 9 miles away from where my shop is now. My dad started the current workshop in 1964 on the site we're in now. So I was taught father to son. I never remember doing an apprenticeship. So I left the armed forces at 21. As a blacksmith, I supported my dad's business, the carriage building business, doing the metalwork. Never had an interest in wood. And about 10 years later, I suddenly thought, hang on, I'm making wheels. And it literally was like that. I don't remember him ever teaching me anything, but yet he's taught me everything. It was so, it just happened. It just evolved, I guess. He was making the vehicles, and I just did all the wheels. I've just finished training an apprentice who's going to be my son-in-law shortly. But it has to be a passion, because it's never really going to make you rich. And he has to buy into that. And I do see a lot of reminiscences between me when my dad was working with me and me working with him. The frustrations, maddeningly. You know, you look at it and think, well, why are you doing it like that? And then I think back and I did exactly the same. And you have to find your own way sometimes. Sam, for example, he didn't know much about history, didn't know anything about wood, but he's now a freeman in the City of London in the Worshipful Company of Wheelwrights, which is all history. And he loves looking and working out the history. I mean, I get hung up on working out how somebody before me has made it. When you get something different in, because you always, something about a wheel, a different gun wheel from the First World War, you try and work out why have they done that? And I love the working out that theory as to why, and working out why they've done it. And and then replicating it. So he's just starting to get that as well. You have to have an eye on the tradition, but don't be bound by it, because with the tradition, they didn't have all the things you have. So they didn't have the machinery, the electric, things like that. So yes, you have to be aware of it, but don't bind yourself to it, because tradition isn't always the right way of doing it. It's the traditional way of doing it. Because today's way, there might be a much more efficient way. And sometimes that means using modern methods. It still has to be structurally sound, structurally the same, and you can't reinvent the wheel, but you can maybe make it a bit more efficiently. But sometimes there's things that really make you go, wow. The Queen's State funeral carriage, I repaired the wheels on that for her funeral. That was a little bit hairs on the back of your neck. You have to be proud of what you do. When you lose that pride in being proud of it going out the door and happy with it, we'll stop doing it. And if you can't quite get it right, learn a bit more, practice a bit more, and get it right. But yes, you have to have pride in your work, because that shines through everything.
E la mia idea era sempre quella di poter arrivare a Modena, perché a Modena c'era la Ferrari, la Lamborghini, la Maserati, e quindi io sognavo, da piccolo sognavo Modena. Già quando avevo 13-14 anni dicevo a mia mamma: io andrò a disegnare e costruire le mie macchine a Modena. Quindi avevo le idee, pur essendo un ragazzino, avevo le idee molto chiare su questo. La cosa più affascinante di tutto questo è che Leonardo, più di 500 anni fa, ha scritto: l'arte e la scienza sono due discipline che possono camminare mano nella mano, perché se l'artista ha più conoscenza scientifica, riesce a rendere più scientifico il suo lavoro. Se l'ingegnere, il tecnico, ha più conoscenza artistica, riesce a fare più bello il suo prodotto. Quindi credo che sia un messaggio, pur che ha 500 anni, ma sempre più recente, più valido. Una delle cose più difficili da mettere a punto in una macchina, dove si lavora degli anni e tutte le macchine sono diverse, quindi non c'è una regola scientifica, è il rapporto che tu hai quando prendi il volante in mano e il feeling che questo volante ti regala, il fatto che devi arrivare a sentire che sono le tue mani che stanno toccando la strada. La macchina diventa una cosa organica ed è tutta collegata con te, no? Cioè è il prolungamento dei tuoi nervi, dei tuoi muscoli, di tutto, è qualcosa di vivo. Cioè la curiosità ti stimola, ci sono tante cose che influiscono nel momento creativo. Quando sono arrivato in Italia, mi sono portato con me tutti questi modellini piccoli in scala così, che avevo fatto quando ero un ragazzo, no? E le vedo così e dico: è stato disegnato in Argentina, sopra il forno di mio padre, cioè lì non è che c'era la cultura, ma evidentemente la passione è quello che ti fa immaginare, quello che accende tutto, no? Come la benzina fa funzionare la macchina, la passione è quello che fa funzionare la tua anima.
To me, couture and art are living in the same universe. I don't really separate them. I often get the question like, are you an artist or a fashion designer? And I just really hope that I don't have to choose. I think it can be symbiotic. And this is a philosophy that I've been working with since the very beginning, and not only art and couture, but also architecture and dance and science, all connect and are interwoven into my work. I still see the work that I'm doing for the body today as being sculptures for the body, where they are like dances around the body. The haute couture pieces are all one-offs, and they take from, I don't know, 500 hours up to 1,500 hours of handwork. So it's spread out over many months. Some are made in 3 months, some take 6 months. The longest one we've been working on is a year. It's often an inspiration to start with the impossible. The more impossible material is, the more inspiring it is for me to translate it into a different physicality. And I think that's my interest in science as well, is to understand the materials that I'm working with more closely, and therefore to give an alchemistic presence to them. But it's really ultimately about capturing an energy. The energy of the material, but also the energy of the person, and to bring that energy to the person's environment. People, when they look at the work, they think, there's so much contradiction in there. It's traditional craftsmanship, but I'm seeing the future. How does it work? But if you think of craftsmanship, everything has been innovation. I work with the needlework, the traditional needlework. When you think of the needle, it was a tool of technology at the time when it was invented, or the lace making, or the plissés. It has all been innovation, and it was revolutionary at the time. So what I'm doing now is just a continuation of that. When I'm working with a 3D printer, I'm just moving forward. I am building upon the knowledge that was before me. And within the aerial sculptures, I'm able to do more of the handwork myself. It has an influence on my conceptual thinking, because I feel that when I'm doing handwork, I'm doing a meditation, and it's a very creative one, because you go into a different reality. It's not the daily reality that I'm in. It's a different universe that my mind goes into. I think it's a birthplace for new ideas. I think it's a birthplace for creativity.
The material part of it has been completely fascinating. I probably, take a lot of risk with my work as well. I kind of believe in the process. And then, a few weeks ago or months ago now, when I went to the foundry to work in the texture, I literally mocked up the texture on a small section one morning and kept going for 2 weeks. With no drawing, nothing in advance, no idea what I was going to do, and walked away. And the texture is kind of fascinating, because I thought that the bronze would be the man-made, the kind of controlled, like quite a disciplined shape, and the wood would be this wonderful natural form, nature piece on top. And now, of course, what's happened is, I spent 2 weeks in a kind of daydreaming, doing this pattern, and that pattern looks like the thing cast from nature, and the freeform wooden part on top looks like the controlled bit. So it's kind of interesting. And then, of course, from a finish point of view, we've arrived at this point where we're gilding it in gold. So everything has the same finish. So you've got my kind of fingerprints, thumbprint, this thumb, kind of just worked over the surface. So that thumbprint is in the bronze, which is coming through the gilding. And then you've got the wood grain. And, you know, if you slice through a tree at a certain angle, you'll reveal a pattern almost exactly like a thumbprint. There's that liveliness or life-like forms. I kind of see it almost like within my whole body of work of where I've been trying to bring nature or even just express the material within the work in an interior context back out into landscape. So it feels full circle for me somehow, and totally logical. And I feel like I've been working on it. That all of my work has been somehow leading to that, and yet it's the start of something new. We started this whole project of making in about placing a value on those that are physically doing, because there's, you know, in every age there's this race for efficiency, but, you know, I don't know what we human beings are trying to be efficient about, you know, in a way. And then to discover Shoji taking care of a tree where, you know, it's almost like the goal is to not do anything, just to preserve the tradition of taking care of the tree. I thought it was a fascinating conversation to bring into making in. We've come into the world, grown up in houses and benefited from generations before us, and really the goal is to just pass something on, not change everything in our time, but maybe just add something and continue. And so it's just a wonderful counterbalance to the race for progress. And, you know, Shoji bringing the tree, yeah, it's a sapling from a sacred tree, but in a way, it's how we are is what makes things important. You know, just treating that like it's more precious than some other tree is, I think, a contradiction. It will be respected and nurtured and cared for, but I think the point really is and Shoji's intent is kind of saying that, you know, here we're taking care of things. I think that's the point. Like anybody could really do it. You know, it's. I don't know how to say it, but in a way, we all have the opportunity to just choose the things we value. And they've chosen to worship a tree, and by passing that from generation to generation, they've created a reality is extraordinary, but it's free for anyone. Anyone could choose to take care of a tree. It's a wonderful thing, really, when we think about it, because there's lots of things you cannot acquire, but you know, it's within everybody's reach. So yeah, of course, it's a phenomenal honor, and but it's also, I think it's what you do next is what's important.